Hey everyone, let me turn this AC off because it's making noise. Hey everyone, welcome to my New York primary guide and AMA, Ask Me Anything. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments or PM me during the show if you have any questions. So let me just start with a couple disclaimers that I'm doing this for myself only. I do not represent Robert Jackson's Senate campaign or Dina Miles' district leader campaign or Uri Litzedek or PASS CVA or any of the other coalitions I'm affiliated with. Just to be 100% clear, I'm speaking for myself and myself only. All right. So if you have any problems with anything I say, take it to me, not to any of those groups. Why am I doing this video? I've been involved with activism and organizing in New York State for a number of years. Started back in college when my mentor and friend, Rabbi Ari Hart, took me up to Rockland County, and we advocated for a fiscal monitor in East Ramapo's public schools, and that's where I really started to get involved with internal New York State political issues. And then I got involved in the coalition to pass the Child Victims Act to extend the statute of limitations in New York State on child sex abuse. Last summer, I interned with the Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, and through those things, I really got into the thick of New York State politics and city politics, more state, going through lists of legislators and their positions. So that's sort of where how I got involved, and I've spent the past year volunteering on various campaigns, and now working on a campaign in Brooklyn, volunteering with Robert Jackson's campaign. So, and I follow this stuff closely, so I want people to be informed. I want everyone to know that the New York primaries are Thursday, September 13th. They're on a Thursday. We never vote on a Thursday, but they're on a Thursday because Rosh Hashanah was 2 days before. And thank you to Assemblyman Bobby Carroll and Senator Simcha Felder, who moved to the date so that it's not on Rosh Hashanah, which is something I lobbied for because I want to be able to vote. And having the election on Rosh Hashanah, especially when it ends so late, would have made it impossible for Orthodox Jews or Jews, a lot of Jews, to vote. So it's on Thursday. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, didn't we already have a primary in New York? And we did for federal races, for the U.S. Senate and congressional races. New York is the only state in the United States that has two separate primaries, one for federal races and one for state races. It's a really bad system because it confuses people, especially when there's a primary in September, which is less than 2 months before a general election. And now it's on a Thursday, so it's even more confusing. It leads to lower turnout, and something I think some people are interested in changing, like to be like every other state and consolidate our old primaries, federal and state, into one day. All right, so getting on to the races, the top of the ticket, and I'll just add before that, I really want everyone to feel inspired to vote and register to vote. I believe very strongly, and I'm speaking mostly to my millennial friends right now, you should vote where you live. I know a lot of us grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, grew up in different states, and have moved to New York City, moved to different places. And sometimes life feels transient. You don't know, different jobs come and go. People move around, get new roommates, get married, different things. I think it's really important to vote in the community that you live in. Being a voter and being involved in the issues in my community has been such a rewarding experience. I've met so many of my neighbors, people I would have never met otherwise. And that's been really exciting for me to just meet new people and feel invested in where you're living. Even if you don't think you're going to live in Washington Heights or whatever it is for the rest of your life, I'm only going to be here for a year or two. You can registering to vote is very easy. It takes 2 seconds to fill out the form. If you live in New York State, you can do it online. If you don't have a state driver's license, you fill out a form, very easy to get. If you want a form, I'll get you a form. So I really strongly believe that you should register to vote in the place that you live. And I say that even if you're from Florida and Ohio, your votes are important in those states. But for the local issues, we need your votes here, and this is your community. So I'm writing a piece that I hope to publish in a newspaper soon on why millennials need to register to vote in the place that they live. All right, now with all that, let's talk about some of the races. I'm really talking about the Democratic primaries. Why am I talking about Democratic primaries? Because Republicans don't really hold state primaries for many positions in New York State. Mark Molinaro, who's running for governor, who's the Republican running for governor, he was chosen by the party. There's no primary to elect him. Another person ran against him, John DeFrancisco, but the party heads were the ones who chose between the candidates. The rank and file Republicans in New York State, I think it's unfortunate, didn't have a say in who their candidate is. So I'm really focused, and I'm a Democrat, so I'm focusing on Democratic primaries. And in New York State, most districts are either heavily Democrat or heavily Republican. There are very few districts that are really swing between just basically some in Long Island and some in Westchester. That's basically, and the Hudson Valley a little bit. That's basically it. Basically every other district is strongly Republican or Democrat. So the primaries are where it happens because there are very few competitive general elections. And even for the statewide races, governor, attorney general, it's extremely unlikely that a Republican would win. There's a 5-to-1 Democrat to Republican voter registration in New York State. The last Republican to win a state election was George Pataki, and it was a very different time. Very different time, very different circumstances, and he was a unique candidate. So governor. We're talking about the governor's race. We have two Democratic candidates. Andrew Cuomo is obviously the incumbent. He's done 2 terms. There's no term limit, so he can run as much as he wants. He's done 2 terms already. He has a strong political background. His father was governor. He was the secretary of HUD under Bill Clinton. He was the New York State Attorney General and has done two full terms as New York State governor. He'll be running on the Democratic line, and because in New York, we allow you to do this very fun thing where you can run on multiple lines. He'll also be running on the Women's Equality Party, which is a party that he started. It is not an old-time feminist party, as a party that Andrew Cuomo started. So he'll also be running on that line, and I believe the Independence Party line. I'm not 100% sure on that. So Andrew Cuomo likes to talk about his accomplishments in his 8 years as governor. He's very proud of the 2011 passing of marriage equality in New York State, increasing the minimum wage in New York. There's something called the SAFE Act, the gun right, anti-gun bill. He's gone to Puerto Rico 5 times now, been a very big advocate for Puerto Rico, and has really been the face on the national Democratic level of anti-Trump policies. He's been speaking out against Trump very strongly, more than a lot of other Democratic politicians. He's widely expected to run for president in 2020, so he might be positioning himself for that. He's received a lot of flack from people sort of more to the left from him. And he's what we call a Clinton Democrat. He's really been mentored by the Clintons. He was going to run for president in 2016, but would not have run against Hillary, who was Hillary and Bill are his mentors. So he is fiscally, he's been more or less conservative. He has not passed any of the big ticket progressive items, such as single-payer health care in New York, such as the Women's Reproductive Health Act. He hasn't passed the Child Victims Act, still hasn't gotten through. There hasn't been any serious criminal justice reform on the state level in the time that he's been in office. And a lot of people say that he likes to work with Republicans. The entire time he's been in power, basically, with some exceptions, most of the time he's been in power, he's had a Republican state Senate, and he sort of likes to work with Republicans, come up with bipartisan things, say, look, me and the Republican state Senate passed marriage equality. If it weren't for the 4 Republican senators who voted for marriage equality, it would not have passed in New York, because some Democrats, like Ruben Diaz, voted against it. He said, with Republicans, we increased the minimum wage. With Republicans, we put on a gun restriction. So he likes to work with Republicans, and he's been tacitly supported. He hasn't campaigned very much for Democratic state senators. It seems like he's been okay with the Republican state Senate, and he's supported the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, the 7 state senators who were their own conference and were in a power-sharing agreement with the Republicans to keep them in power. So he's gotten a lot of flack from the left for this, which brought about, and it was pretty clear he was going to get a challenge from the left this year. In 2014, he was challenged by Zephyr Teachout, a sort of unknown law professor who ended up getting 1/3 of the Democratic vote. This year, he's being challenged by Cynthia Nixon, who's running on the Democrat and also has the Working Family Party as sort of the more progressive Democratic wing. So as they paint themselves, Cynthia Nixon is running against him. She likes to call herself and she is the progressive challenger. She has criticized Cuomo for not passing a lot of these things, for not passing the Women's Reproductive Health Act, the Contraceptive Care Act, the Child Victims Act. Criticized that a lot of these things, like the minimum wage increases, are very watered down. They don't take in effect for a number of years. They don't apply to a lot of people. The governor's college tuition program only applies to very few select number of people. She has criticized his fiscal conservatism, and she has also really criticized his handling of the MTA, which he primarily oversees. The MTA, in truth, is not any one person's responsibility. The governor oversees a majority of the MTA, but not all of it, but a lot of it. And Ms. Nixon has really criticized the governor for the summer of hell, the subway delays, the subway meltdowns. Cynthia Nixon's background, she was on a show called Sex and the City. I never watched it, I don't know anything about it. That show went off the air about 15, 20 years ago. And in the time since, she's worked as an education advocate and community organizer. She's gay, and she has been working activist for gay rights for a long time. And public education rights. She was protesting at the airports when the Muslim ban came out. So a lot of people criticize Nixon and say she has no experience. I really don't think that's true. there are men who have far less experience who run for office where people haven't said that about. And she has worked as an activist, and I don't think you necessarily need to have held a lower level elected position to now hold a higher level elected position. Someone on New York once said, I forgot who it was, I really liked it, said, if you end up waiting your turn, which is the term usually used, you end up like Adriano Espaillat, my congressman, who's in his 60s and ran for Congress every year and never made it until Charlie Rangel finally retired, and now he's in his 60s and he's just starting his career in Congress. That's the digression. So I think Cynthia Nixon, a lot of people didn't take the campaign very seriously at first. The governor called it political silly season when she announced. But she has really proven herself. She's maintained a strong campaign, a strong support, especially in New York City. And a lot of people, I think, thought she would have dropped out by now. And she, far from dropping out, she is in it to win it. The poll numbers haven't been amazing for her, to say the least. But she's running a serious campaign, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Whether if she wins, it will obviously be a very big upset. Even if she doesn't win, first of all, she can continue to run on the Working Families Party line, even though the Working Families Party doesn't want her to do that, so she won't be a spoiler. But even if she doesn't win, even if she gets a significant portion of the vote, that could really hurt Cuomo in terms of his presidential ambitions. If his rivals say, listen, you're running for the Democratic nomination and you only got 55% of the vote in your Democratic primary in your own state, and I think it'll send Cuomo a message that he's got to start moving on issues. We call it the Nixon effect. Nixon criticized him for supporting the IDC. The IDC was disbanded a couple weeks later. Nixon came out in support of recreational marijuana. Now the governor, who had just a year ago was speaking out, no way, it's a horrible thing, marijuana, is basically supporting recreational marijuana. It's like clear he doesn't want to, but he's sort of going ahead with it. He spent the past 8 years not passing the Reproductive Health Act, and Cynthia Nixon starts talking about the Reproductive Health Act, and now he wants a special session of the Senate to pass the Reproductive Health Act. The Reproductive Health Act would codify Roe v. Wade into New York state law and make abortion a health issue. It's currently a criminal issue under state law. If Roe v. Wade were overturned tomorrow by a new Supreme Court, actually New York would have laws that New York's laws predate Roe v. Wade and are more restrictive than Roe v. Wade. So that would codify Roe v. Wade as New York state law. So that's the governor's race. It's going to be it's an interesting race. Nixon has put a lot of pressure on the governor, and whether it obviously would be very exciting if she won. I think even if she doesn't win, she has already sent a message to the governor, and depending on if she gets a significant percentage of the vote, that could really be difficult for the governor. I'm surprised that the governor didn't take the message last time when he lost a third of the vote to Zephyr Teachout, who ran far less of a campaign with far less name recognition than Cynthia Nixon. Cynthia Nixon has described herself recently as a democratic socialist, although the democratic socialists have distanced themselves. That's an interesting thing. They say she's not socialist enough for them. So go figure on that. Okay, so we've talked about the governor's race. So I'm going to move on to other races. Let's talk about, and you can ask any questions, let's talk about the lieutenant governor's race. In New York, the lieutenant governor and governor run separately in the primary. They don't run as one ticket. So there's two candidates, Kathy Hochul, but I'll just say the winner of the governor's race and lieutenant governor's race will run together as a ticket in the general election, whether they like each other or not. It's sort of like how the system used to be in the United States, where you could have a president and a vice president who didn't like each other because they were elected separately. So lieutenant governor is elected separately. So the incumbent is Kathy Hochul. Cuomo has tried to get her out. He just realized that she's a bit of a liability for him. She hasn't really done much. She's really just been a spokesperson for Cuomo. She has very little record of accomplishments on her own as a lieutenant governor. And he really tried to get her to run for Congress against Chris Collins. Kathy Hochul used to be a Congress member. And Kathy Hochul declined. She wanted to keep her job, so now she's running, run with Cuomo's endorsement. But I think Cuomo would have preferred to have someone like Tish James, someone with a more bona fide progressive background, to be his running mate. I think with Kathy Hochul, she doesn't necessarily have that bona fide progressive background. A lot of critics like to point out she has an A rating from the NRA, has been endorsed by the NRA, which for a Democrat these days is not something you want to see. Now her opponent is Brooklyn Councilman Jumaane Williams. There aren't usually very competitive lieutenant governor races, so it's interesting that this happened, that there is a competitive race. Nixon and Williams say they are not running together. They say they're both endorsed by the Working Families Party and share a lot of values, but they are maintaining separate campaigns for now. But it's sort of seen as their one ticket, even though they claim they are not. Jumaane Williams has been a social justice advocate. He's been out there, racial justice and the immigration stuff and Trump stuff. He's been arrested. He's really been on the streets protesting over the past couple of years. And his idea, listen, this is interesting. He wants to make the lieutenant governor's position similar to the New York City public advocate's position, in that he thinks the job of the lieutenant governor should be not just to be a spokesperson for the governor, but to actually be a little bit of a check on the governor and to pressure the governor and to do certain things. He also, like Hochul's past NRA endorsement, he has had his own issues. He has said that he personally believes that marriage is between a man and a woman. He has made comments that he personally does not believe in abortion. And his line about those issues has always been, well, I 100% support LGBT rights and abortion rights legally. I've always voted in favor of LGBT rights and abortion rights. I've never voted against them, which I think is factually true. I Googled a little bit. There's no vote on record where he voted against any of those things, but he is upfront that in his personal belief. He believes marriage is between a man and a woman, and he's not so sure about if abortion should be allowed. So that also, it's like a lot of Democrats are really struggling with this. On one hand, he's a social justice advocate. He's taking on the establishment. There's a very anti-establishment thing, and he's the progressive. But what does it mean to vote for someone, even if they said they support LGBT rights, who says that they personally still believe that marriage is between a man and a woman? Let's say lieutenant governor. This year, it's actually really important, because when the governor is out of town, lieutenant governor becomes the governor. Or if the governor resigns or is indicted also and has to leave office, then the lieutenant governor becomes the governor. And with Cuomo, there's going to be a presidential race in 2020. Cuomo is either going to run or be campaigning with whoever is running. So he's going to be out of state a lot, which means the lieutenant governor is going to be doing a lot. And if Cuomo runs, and if he happens to actually win the presidency in 2020, then the lieutenant governor would become the governor. So we might be voting for the next governor of New York between Kathy Hochul and Jumaane Williams, which is really interesting because I don't think either of them ever thought they would be the governor of New York. So this is a very serious race, I believe. And I am actually still torn about who to vote for. I haven't made up my mind yet on this one. I see pluses and minuses for both candidates. Both have progressive things and both have some skeletons, I'll say, in the closet a little bit. The lieutenant governor also presides over the state senate. But unlike the vice president in the U.S. Senate, and I've seen lawyers on Twitter get this wrong. Lawyers on Twitter telling me I'm wrong, and they're wrong. The lieutenant governor is not a tie-breaking vote in the New York Senate. If there's a tie, a bill does not pass. The lieutenant governor does not cast a tie-breaking vote. That came into play this year when a Republican senator decided to join the Navy and leave in the middle of the year, and you had a split Senate with 31 Democrats and 31 Republicans. And Kathy Hochul presided over the Senate. It was a total mess. She seemed very flabbergasted and confused. The Republicans were very mean to her. But she was not able. She's able to break a tie on procedural votes, but she's not able to break a tie on a bill vote. All right, just check questions here. All right, moving on. This year we have an attorney general's race. This was not expected to happen this year. Eric Schneiderman was our attorney general. He was really beloved and expected to run for governor and move up. He was a really beloved figure. And then stuff came out about him a few months ago. Not just like he tried to kiss someone in a hotel or a woman in a hotel or he made a lewd joke, some horrifying things that he did to women. And he very swiftly resigned. Which was a good thing for the state that did not drag out. Then there was this process in the state legislature who had to, it was their responsibility to appoint a replacement. And there was all this jockeying, who's it going to be? Tish James quickly threw her hat into the race, and a few assemblymen and senators were trying to get their colleagues to vote for them to be the interim attorney general. But then Barbara Underwood, who was at the time the Solicitor General, who became the acting Attorney General when Schneiderman resigned, people started to look at her and look how that she is amazingly qualified. She is a former acting Solicitor General of the United States. She has amazing resume. She's just a great person, and she's not a political person. She's no interest in politics, no interest in running for office, and has no interest in running for attorney general. So everyone basically dropped out of the race and said, all right, let's not make this a political process. Let's keep this very qualified woman. I think woman was important because of what Schneiderman did to women. Let's keep her in place until January. And the state Senate and Assembly voted unanimously, with one exception, except for Assemblyman Charles Barron, who's a bit of a rabble-rouser, besides her, and voted unanimously to make Barbara Underwood not the acting attorney general, but the interim attorney general, which means she will remain in that position until January 2019, when the winner of this election, not a special election, a regular election that was supposed to be just Eric Schneiderman. No one was going to run against him. And now it is wide open. So who's running? The front runner, and I'd say establishment candidate, is Tish James. Tish James was the New York City public advocate. It's a long career in public service. She was on the city council, fought against Barclays Center. This is her now second term as public advocate. She was widely expected to run for mayor. She has a very long and successful resume and career in New York City politics. And she has a ton of endorsements. Basically every elected official that I've seen has been endorsing her. She's widely endorsed. what's interesting is that when she ran for a public advocate, she only ran on the Working Families Party line, and she ran as a progressive insurgent against Daniel Squadron, who was the sort of more was the Democrat and was the more establishment candidate, and she won only on the Working Families Party line, not as a Democrat. She beat the Democrat in the race. So she has always been seen as a sort of a real progressive holder. She holds up the progressive wing of the party, and I've met her. She's very likable, very nice person. It's hard to argue with her. It's hard to not like her if you ever meet her. She's a really wonderful person who has done a lot of wonderful things for New York City, including like a lot of work in public advocate, criminal justice reform work. She's done work with women's rights. Now you can have salary history on a job application. Her main message as Attorney General is she's taking on Trump. That's everyone's message, but that's her message, and that you use the role of Attorney General. The official role of Attorney General is to defend the state of New York. But the Attorney General of a state like New York, very high-profile position, also often uses that role to do proactive legislation. Eric Schneiderman and Barbara Underwood both used their position to sue the Trump administration over many things, Muslim ban, immigration laws. So she's ready to use that, use her platform to take on Trump. And she said on a podcast, Maxim Murphy, that I listened to, that she will defend the laws of New York despite her personal beliefs. That's sort of always an issue that comes up with the Attorney General. Is her job is to defend the laws of New York. Sometimes she might not agree with some of the laws of New York, but she said that she will always defend the state. That's her job, to defend the state. This is not a product placement by LaCroix. I just really like LaCroix. She wants to take on Trump and defend the laws of New York State. Her main challenger is Zephyr Teachout from the 2014 primary, who's been working as an activist since then. She's been working as an activist since then. She's been a leader of the anti-IDC movement. She ran for Congress and lost in a close election. She also wants to take on Trump, but I think the biggest difference between her and Tish James is that Zephyr Teachout, first of all, she says she's not James is endorsed by Cuomo, and she's running the anti-Cuomo a little bit like on the same ticket as Cynthia Nixon and Jumaane Williams, although not officially, but she worked for Cynthia Nixon as her treasurer before the Attorney General's race opened up. She's very focused on internal issues as well, meaning corruption in Albany, fighting corruption in Albany, reopening the Moreland Commission, the commission the governor made to investigate corruption in New York State, which he shut down once they started investigating him. A lot of criticism. There's been a lot of high-profile trials of Cuomo aides lately. Elaine Calieros and Joe Prococo, two of Cuomo's top people, were really are on their way to jail as we speak. So Zephyr Teachout is committed to fighting corruption within New York State, as well as on the national scene. I think that's the real difference between her and Tish James. I've not heard Tish James talk very much about if Joe Prococo, who was Cuomo's campaign manager and number one aide, she hasn't talked about how we need to root out the things that led to Joe Prococo's indictment and imprisonment for using government offices to campaign, which is illegal, and bid rigging by Elaine Calieros. So that's going to be an interesting election to watch. Again, we'll see Can Zephyr Teachout pull it out? I really hope so. I'm a very big fan of Zephyr Teachout. But again, even if she doesn't win, she can also damage, really send a message. There are two other candidates running for Attorney General. I know this is getting long, so I apologize. There's a lot going on. Sean Patrick Maloney, who's a congressman, he's also talking about this anti-Trump. He doesn't have much support, not really endorsed by anyone. Honestly, I'm not really sure what he's hoping to get out of this run. He really wants to be Attorney General. He's ran in the past. But he just does. The progressive insurgent vote is going to Zephyr. The establishment is going to Tish. People will sort of, I think, divide themselves up between those two. Sean Patrick Maloney, I haven't even seen him campaigning. There's a lot of questions over his campaigning because his money is from federal campaigns. It's not clear if he can use that money from federal campaigns for a state campaign. It's not even clear if he's allowed to run for a congressional seat at the same time, which he's doing, at the same time he's running for a state attorney general seat. So there's a lot of issues with Sean Patrick Maloney's campaign. He's a really good guy, but I'm not sure what he's doing in this race. Also, Alicia Eve, who is a aide to Cuomo and Clinton, who has very little support, and I am also not sure why she's running. I wouldn't be surprised if she dropped out before the primary. Just because she's a Cuomo aide, but she's not endorsed by Cuomo. I haven't seen her anywhere campaigning, so I think her campaign is probably running out of steam. Those are the state-wide races. Now let's talk a little bit about district races, state senate, state assembly. I apologize for that. Let's look at the state senate. There's a lot of state senate primaries going on. Is it 7 or 8? All 8 IDC senators. It used to be 7 until very recently. All 8 IDC senators who were part of the Independent Democratic Conference, who were in a power sharing agreement with the Republicans, to give the Republicans in charge of the state senate, despite them not having a numerical majority. Google it. Or look at past videos I made about the IDC. They're all facing challenges. In Riverdale, the Bronx, Jeff Klein is being challenged by the IDC incumbent, by Alessandra Biaggi. She's an amazing woman. Her longtime Bronxite and activist. She worked on Hillary's campaign, I believe. Yes, she was a high-level person in Hillary's campaign. Here in Washington Heights, Upper West Side, Chelsea, our IDC Senator Marisol Alcantara is facing a very serious challenge from Robert Jackson, who has a lot of endorsements, and I think I volunteer for the campaign. I think he's gonna win, but that's gonna be a very big race. Another very big race in Queens, Jose Peralta, IDC senator, being challenged by Jessica Ramos. Jessica Ramos is an amazing Latina woman who's I'm very excited to have her. I think she's gonna win as well. Jesse Hamilton in Brooklyn. It's like Crown Heights. It's central Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Prospect Heights area. Other parts. It's a very gerrymandered, weird district. Look that up. You should know who your state senator is. He's facing a very serious challenge from Zellner Myrie, who's a young activist and lawyer, who's a very talented public speaker. Also, I met him. Very impressive. And I really hope he wins. Diane Savino in Staten Island, some of Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, being challenged by Jazzy Robinson. Jazzy Robinson, amazing activist in Brooklyn. Diane Savino and Jeff Klein were the founders of the Independent Democratic Conference, also boyfriend and girlfriend, but that's unreal. That's gossipy. So I mean, it's true, but I'm not the tabloid. So Diane Savino being challenged by Jazzy Robinson. I really wish Jazzy all the best tough race because Staten Island, not always the most progressive place, to say the least. Upstate, there's one, Dave Valesky being challenged by Rachel May. In Rockland County, you have David Carlucci being challenged by a teacher, Julie Goldberg, a young teacher who's very exciting. And very, very last minute, literally last minute, Tony Avella in Queens is being challenged by John C. Liu. I think that's going to be a close race. He almost beat Avella. He ran against Avella last time and almost beat him. I think he should beat him this time. Liu used to be the comptroller, ran for mayor. His mayoral campaign sort of imploded, had some financial scandals. But he's back. He was never accused of anything, but his campaign was. He's back and running on the True Blue ticket, and I think he's going to win. And I hope all the IDC challengers win because I'm not a fan of the IDC. We'll talk more about the IDC another time. And I'll say all the challengers there are sort of running under the True Blue ticket. They're running together, basically focusing on the Independent Democratic Conference's alliance with Republicans to keep the Republicans in power. Then we have Senator Simcha Felder from Brooklyn. He's always a fun person. He runs as a Democrat and a Republican. So even if he loses, he's facing a Democratic primary from a guy named Blake Morris. Even if he loses, he will remain in the race as Republican. He is a Democrat who has caucused with the Republicans, not just supported the Republicans, but actually caucused with them in Albany. And this year, once the IDC disbanded, which is not true, but they claim to have disbanded, Simcha Felder was the one person at the end of the session, literally the last few weeks of the session, who kept the Republicans in power. Simcha has broad support. I think Blake Morris, it's going to be an uphill battle for him, but it's interesting because Cuomo said he wanted to find someone else to run against Simcha, but he never did. So, all right, but that primary is happening. So if you live in Borough Park, that area is something to keep an eye on. Then there's one other primary against an incumbent senator. Senator Marty Dillon is facing a primary from a young woman who's been around a very long time. Face primary from a young millennial, very much Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez-esque, a person named Julia Salazar. Julia Salazar is also part of the Democratic Socialists of America. She's an upstart, and her campaign is mostly focused on housing and rent reform, accusing her opponent of being in the pockets of real estate and not supporting rent reform and things he did on the city council to not promote rent reform. So that's going to be actually really interesting to see. And she has a lot of support. So we might actually see a non-IDC, non-Simcha Felder incumbent Democrat lose a primary, which would be pretty shocking. A lot of support. There's one other Democratic primary to take on incumbent Republican in New York, Senator Marty Golden. There's a lot of South Central Brooklyn, including mostly Bay Ridge. Andrew Gennardis and Ross Barkan going up against each other for that in that district. There's not many policy differences between the two. They're both sort of liberal Democrats looking to take down Senator Marty Golden. Gennardis has been around a while. He's on the community board. He's currently the counsel to Borough President Eric Adams. He's a longtime activist, endorsed by the Families Party, by Justin Brannan, who is a very powerful politician in Brooklyn right now, city councilman. Ross Barkan, a little bit different. He's younger, 28 years old, but he was a very successful journalist before he decided to run. He hasn't run for anything in the past. He's endorsed by People for Bernie, endorsed by Julia Salazar. He's more aligned, I think, with the more progressive wing, even though I don't think there are many policy differences between the two. The main argument Barkan seems to be making against Gennardis is that Gennardis actually has already run against Marty Golden and lost. So if it didn't work for you in the past, why do you think it's going to work for you now? Let someone else run. And there's a lot of primaries. There's a few primaries on Long Island and upstate to challenge either Republican state senators or open seats. 4 Republican state senators resigned or are leaving the Senate this year, which is a lot. I think they're afraid, basically blue wave. So check if you live on Long Island, if you live upstate, check those. Look up who your state senator is, and look up if there's a race. People to watch: Monica Martinez, who's trying to take Bonisic, who's retiring seat. Luis Del Maro trying to take on Phil Boyle, trying to take on Phil Boyle. Maybe. There's a few other Republicans upstate who really have a chance. James Skoufis is going to running for Senator Larkin's seat, and I think he's going to win. If he wins, Democrats only need 1 more seat. They have a numerical majority, but Simcha-Felder is with the Republicans. So the Democrats need 1 more seat to actually control the Senate, assuming the IDC doesn't come back together. Hopefully they'll all be gone by January anyway. So look up if you have, there are other some other state Senate primaries. Those are the main ones. The Assembly has 150 members. 104 of them are Democrats, and they're very well controlled by the Speaker, Carl Hastie. There's a couple open seats, one in Yonkers, one in Brooklyn. It doesn't really matter who wins these races. The Assembly is very tightly controlled, and it's such an overwhelming Democratic majority that it doesn't matter. I'll just say my District 71, my very good friend Al Taylor, who I love, he's our Assemblyman, took over for the late Denny Farrell. I think he's doing an excellent job. He's being challenged by a man named Luis Tejada, who was placed there by Marisol Contra to punish Taylor for endorsing Robert Jackson. So if you live here in Washington Heights, part of Harlem, look up if you live in 71 who your state assemblyman is. It's either him or Carmen De La Rosa. If it's Al Taylor, make sure when you're voting for Robert Jackson that you also vote for Al Taylor. I was supposed to cover a lot of things. Time has really eluded me. You're going to see a lot of other things on the ballot as well when you go there September 13th. You're going to see district leader. What the heck is a district leader? I'm working as a campaign manager for a district leader. District leader is every district, assembly district, sends a male and a female representatives of the state party. It is you're not part of a legislature. It's not a legislative position. It's a leadership position within the Democratic Party. And it is 1 male, 1 female. Obviously, if you're not into the gender binary, this presents a problem. But the responsibilities of district leader include nominating party heads, the head of the party, each county, New York, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx have heads of parties. They select judges. They recruit and endorse candidates. And when there's special election, they choose candidates. Actually, oftentimes they become candidates in special elections. It's an important position. Most of the time, it is an uncontested position. In my district here at 71, our district leaders are Robert Jackson, Maria Luna. I don't think there's anyone challenging them. In Brooklyn, there are a few contested district leader races. Genesis Aquino, Adina Miles Sash, Flatbush Girl, obviously I love, and a few other people. They have some. So if you live in Brooklyn, you might want to look up which assembly district you live in, and if there's any district leader races in your district, because there they have some contested ones, but most of the time district leader is not contested. But if it is, it's a serious thing, and I really suggest looking up who's running for district leader, because the district leaders select your judges. They select who's going to be the head of the party. in the history of New York, there's been one female once, a long time ago, who was the head of the party. We need more women in leadership. So make sure we're endorsing and voting for strong women to be our female district leaders. You'll see on your ballot elections for judgeships, civil court, and these are very confusing. Most of the time, also unopposed. Shah Ali, who's the head of the community board here in Uptown Manhattan, CB12, is running for civil court judge. He's a very successful lawyer, and we wish him well. I'm not sure how contested some. It's hard to even find information on some of these judicial elections. They're very. If you can find any information, look it up, but it's very hard to because it's just not. There's just not a lot of info out there. A lot of the judges, they're lawyers. They're not necessarily campaigners. All right, this has already gone on a while. I think it's important to support local media. We all saw this week there was a very sad story about the Daily News. Trunk, which is some corporation which owns the Daily News, literally laid off 50% of the staff of the Daily News. The Daily News, I don't think of it as a tabloid. It's actually, they do some really important reporting on local news. So we need to support local media. It's really important right now to support local media. They're really struggling. The Daily News was a really big hit to them. That the Daily News has been severely cut down. They lost their City Hall reporter. The main New York paper doesn't have a City Hall reporter. It's crazy. If you want some suggestions, how do I follow them? Follow me on Twitter. Follow people on Twitter. Follow the Daily News, New York Now, Ben Max, Jarrett Murphy. They have a great podcast called Max and Murphy. It's a New York Now podcast. City and State magazine is a great magazine for local politics. I subscribe. It's free for students, or it's not that expensive. It's worth paying for to get their magazine, or you can read it online. I get their daily emails, which include a daily schedule of all political events for the day. So if you want to see what's going on, watch New York One Inside City Hall on at 7 and 11 p.m. with Errol Lewis. It's an amazing show. If you watch Inside City Hall with Errol Lewis, you will know everything going on in local politics. You will not need long, rambling videos by me. I read the New York Times from the back to the front. The Ryan Lehrer Show often covers local issues. Follow people on Twitter, Ken Lovett, Jimmy Fieldkind, Zach Fink, a lot of great reports. Other people who I'm forgetting right now. Follow me on Twitter and I'll connect you with people. I wanted to talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because I know a lot of people talk about her. I was wondering if I should make a separate video about her. I'll just say there's a lot of misinformation about her by people who haven't really followed her campaign. Saying when she ran for Congress, I said I wouldn't talk about congressional campaigns, but her campaign, so what's interesting, she really ran her campaign like it was a very local campaign. Her pillars were that Joe Crowley is absent, lives in Virginia. Joe Crowley supported by real estate. Joe Crowley has an outsized role as a Queen Party chair. He's undercut progressive organizations, the deal with the IDC. A lot of people have been criticizing Alexandria for being a socialist. So she's a socialist. Calling her socialist isn't going to stop her from being a socialist. Is it a broader trend throughout the country? I don't think so. I think different districts have different needs. This district, this is what she wanted. What they wanted, she worked hard, and this is what the people of that district wanted. I'll just say because Israel's been an issue with her. I applaud her for saying that she doesn't know, she's not an expert on Israel and wants to learn more, and she said she wants to visit Israel. So I think that's a great opportunity. I don't think she's going to join standwithus.org or AIPAC, but I think when she comes to Congress, she has an opportunity to learn a lot about Israel. Foreign policy was not part of her campaign. It was a zero part of her campaign. She's not going to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee. She was really focused on economic issues, mostly housing. So I think all the people freaking out about Israel, it's okay. I think her campaign has inspired a lot of the insurgents, given a lot of fire to Cynthia, to Jemani, and Zephyr, and the IDC challengers. After she beat Joe Crowley was the most, I would say Joe Crowley, maybe even tied with the governor in terms of most influential people in New York politics. Definitely more than the mayor. And when he lost, so many people came out of the woodwork to all these city councilmen started endorsing Cynthia Nixon, and Corey Johnson, the speaker, and all these congressmen and assembly people started endorsing the challengers to the IDC. So Joe Crowley had a very outsized influence, and it's interesting to see now politicians in New York are like, we're free to be who we are without Joe Crowley. So thank you for listening. I don't want to go past an hour. I'm just scrolling to see if there's any questions. I'd like to. I got one comment from Benjamin Siegel. Thank you for your comment that Jillian Jurgensen from Daily News is still at City Hall. So that's good to hear that Daily News still has a City Hall reporter. See if there's any other comments. But yeah, really right now we got to support local media. We got to, because of what's going on, it's just being destroyed because people only care about the latest Trump-Russia tweet. I'm happy to say, I don't know, I don't follow Trump and Russia. I think this is all a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting. Remember, register to vote where you live, not where you're from. You live here now, wherever here is. September 13th, Thursday, 2 days after Rosh Hashanah. You're going to get out there. I know it's hard to vote. Sometimes you work. I really like whatever you got to do. Wake up early. 6 a.m. polls open in New York. Be there at 6 if you have to. It's really important elections. Be sure to vote. Be sure to follow what's going on. Follow people on social media. Local elected officials are usually very easy to contact. They're not celebrities, so it's like if you contact them, they're like, oh, so contact me. So get involved in a campaign and stay involved, stay and vote. Make sure to vote. Should I say stay woke? I don't know what that means. All right. Thank you all for listening, and find me on Twitter at @WhatDaniel. I talk about state politics a lot there. See y'all.